quick reminder, each episode could contain some game spoilers, so please listen or watch with discretion. And now, your hosts for The Gamer's Advocate, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Gamer's Advocate, where we discuss various topics within gaming, things that are important just not only to gamers, but also to the bigger picture. Sometimes we discuss culture, society, and all that other stuff. But today we're going to be talking about challenge runs and speed runs. But before we do that, hey, Banana, what have you been up to this week?
In terms of gaming, I'd say still toying with the idea of doing my first Elden Ring playthrough. At this point, I feel like I've been so inundated with that game that I don't need to play it. But at the same time, having watched a lot of it, I think I might be interested in doing my own playthrough. But I haven't gotten started on that. I've been doing a lot of V-Rising, which has been a lot of fun. I'm truly a fan. But outside of gaming, it's been a lot of the same old.
How about yourself, Com?
This week in gaming, not nearly as much as I would like. There's two things going on right now. I'm doing my second playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which, oddly enough, linked to the topic that we're going to be talking today. I'm doing a hard mode playthrough, and trust me, when that game says hard, it really means it. And the second thing is I've been prepping for my playthrough of Elden Ring as well, but that's going to be for the DLC, which I'm hoping to stream. Let's go. Baby weapon for babies. I mean, what? And ideally, by the time this podcast actually comes out, that'll be cleared from the backlog, and I'll be able to see what everyone's been talking about, because it has been getting some rave reviews from some friends of mine. And Banana, 100% recommended. Same as you, I saw Elden Ring before I played it, and I felt like I had almost seen everything the game had to offer. Even so, playing with it is something special. What about you, Legion?
Well, editing and more editing. It's kind of like my I have a separate occupation, of course, but it seems like that's all I do now is edit, because I have this channel, my own channel, and I'm developing a third channel. So yeah, that's all I tend to do now. Eat, sleep, and drink editing.
Eat, sleep, edit, repeat.
That's pretty much it. But as far as gaming goes, there's been a few games I've had my eyes on, but I'll be honest with you, they're so new, I don't even remember the names of them, but they're really interesting, and I totally intended to bring one or two of them up. But like I said, they're brand new. They came out this past week. One of them's a foot game where it's an action combat game. You have a gun, but you're kicking down doors. You're kicking their shields, and depending on what shoe you wear, you have different attributes. So you can jump farther from one platform to another. You can kick harder, or you can sprint from one zone to the other much faster. It's a whole shoe foot combat thing.
Come on, it's a shooter.
Yeah,
Come on.
Shoot ha.
Shoot her!
Yeah, truly.
I mean, every time that you think we've seen everything in video games, apparently not.
It is called, I looked it up, Angerfoot. Angerfoot.
That is a name. Yeah. That's awful.
Angerfoot is a lightning-fast, hard bass blast of kicking doors and kicking ass, crashing through caffeine-fueled fever dream of city. Putting in the boot to menacing menagerie of merciless gangsters. Unleash the world's deadliest feat on a colorful cast of anthropomorphic enemies. And what's funny is that when you die, they start dancing like at a rave. Like, oh, you died. Yeah.
What happened to Dragon Age, Legion? Yeah. Let's just go play Dragon Age.
Is this a BioWare game?
Yeah. BioWare's lost their way.
Yeah.
They're not the same developer anymore.
They certainly aren't.
Anthem, then this.
But anyway.
That actually does remind me.
I hope not.
I recently got, just going back to previous games, so talking BioWare. It reminds me, I recently got gifted the DLC for Darkest Dungeon 2, which was awesome. I kind of got to remember why I really enjoyed that game. And I don't know that the DLC was anything exceptional. It kind of brings back characters you've already played as in the first one, but it was just a nice kind of, oh yeah, I remember this game. I don't know that it really had the staying power of other games, but I did enjoy playing through it and the challenge that it provided, because that game was really difficult.
I love that. I love it when a game's DLC just pulls you back in and just reminds you what you loved. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to just at some point breaking out the Final Fantasy 16 DLC. As I understand it, it's quite short. It's only a few hours long. It's all about just having fun with the combat, which is what the game was so damn good at. And I remember loving that. So I'm just hoping that when I sit down, when I play it, when I put that menu back on, when I hear the bass music, when I see Clive's wonderful hair and hear his terrific voice, that it's just going to pull me back in time to when I was playing that.
Well, there you go.
I have to hold back, or we're gonna change the topic of conversation to just DLC or something like that.
Yeah, that's a possible topic for the future. That's for sure. We got a myriad of them, and there's probably 100% chance that we'll circle back to some of these anyway. So.
Oh yeah.
So you mean we didn't finish lore?
we discussed everything there needed to be discussed. We're not.
You mean the 3 hours that we spent talking about music that you cut down to an hour and a half? that conversation still needs more.
Yeah. We as far as like the speed running and challenge, I'm not very experienced with it because it's not something I like to do. I like to really taste my games. I really like to sit there and savor them. Right. I want to be able to like get everything in. When I first played Baldur's Gate 3, of course, I was the day one early access person. But even when the full game came out, people were like, I've already finished it. This is what it, blah, blah, blah. Why?
You didn't finish anything.
I do everything 3, 4, 5, 6 times over to see if there's a variability there, because I already knew that the game had a lot of variability to begin with. And I was already shocked that Karlach already looked different. And I said, this is a different body model, in fact. Will is a totally different voice actor. So a lot of things were happening that I was like, I have to re-experience this. And so I'd already been familiar with like the replayability and the various outcomes of different scenarios. So I went ahead and just slowly played it through just like that. Back in my younger days, when I was a kid, played Metroid, and Mario Brothers had the ability to kind of skip levels, if you knew that. And so it was one of those things that with the aid of Nintendo Power, we learned there were these unlockable regions that if you went to this pipe or that pipe and blah, 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 and you went down in it, then you could skip certain like 3, 5, and 7 or something, or go into 3, 5, and 7. But Metroid was the only one that I sped run unintentionally. I didn't even know. I just got so good at it. One day I played, and a friend of mine was over with his sisters, and they liked watching, Metroid. And I played it fairly decent speed. I think it was about 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. And the helmet came off, and it was a female. We were like, we didn't know. Nobody told us. We didn't know. And they just found that like really great. And so they said, oh, Samus is a female. I was like, okay, yeah, great. Wonderful. And then I got better at it to where I could do it under an hour. And I found out, well, more of her clothes come off. And then you could play the...
Luckily you were playing by yourself at that time.
Maybe,
over and over
maybe,
again.
yeah. She had a bikini on and whatnot, but then you could play the kind of like the next game in basically a bikini. But yeah, it's one of those things that you inadvertently find out that you could speedrun that game with a result. But a lot of the community now, it seems like speedruns are more or less just who can finish this the fastest. And I've never gotten into that because to me, the game that's not really the intent of it. There are certain games that kind of lend itself to that issue. Like Only Up is one of those that uses a ton of assets, and really there's no story whatsoever. The idea is just to get up there, and outside of ranking who can get up there the fastest, there's not really much of a challenge to that. But anyway, what are you guys' experiences?
So I don't really have any background in speed running. It was never something that really interested me personally. I've never watched a huge amount either, but once in a while I will be interested by what I see as the two forms of speed running. It's something we've discussed before, which I'll go into in a few minutes. My first experience of speed running and being aware of it, this wouldn't have been on an international standard or anything like that, but I remember being around a friend's house, and a few of us were over, and he beat Resident Evil 2, and I think it was under 2 hours or under 3 hours, and there was some sort of a reward if you did that. Maybe it was infinite ammo, maybe it was unlocking playing as the tofu block, something like that, and he was desperately trying to get underneath this 2 or 3 hour window. That's my first memory of speed running. Aside from that, I don't really have a background in it at all, so any interest I might have in the subject was always from viewing, and I didn't do much of that. But the thing we've discussed before, or that I've mentioned, is that for me there's two different types of speed runs when it comes to watching them, and I like to consider it like the Olympics. So you have what I would call regular speedrunning, and this is the Olympics. And in regular speedrunning, what you do is you play through the game in the way the developers intended, and you play through the game as fast as you can. So if your game is 30 hours long, we're not talking about the speedruns where you're done in 5 minutes. We're talking about the speedruns where you fight all the bosses you're supposed to. You go through every fight the way you're supposed to. So your 30-hour game maybe becomes a 20-hour game because you've just been optimal in the way you've played it. And then there's the other way, which for me I liken to being the drug fuel testosterone launched Olympics, the one where you say, screw this, everyone gets to be the Hulk. We're not going to have humans doing this anymore. This is superhumans. And that superhuman Olympics for me, fueled by every substance you can imagine, that's the any percent speedrunning. And any percent speedrunning where you try and break the game, where you try and bypass all sections of the game, and you beat Elden Ring in 15 seconds. Or you beat Final Fantasy 7 under 2 hours, whatever the case may be. And I think I find that one more interesting, but I find more enjoyment in a classic speedrun of someone playing the game correctly as fast as they can. So that's all my background with it. It's not very much.
It's very funny that you kind of break up the two different categories of speedrun in that way, because I find my response to them would be the exact opposite to Olympic events in that regard.
Wait a minute.
To say that
there's disharmony between you two?
Episode
I don't
7?
know about that.
Hold on.
7.
But I think the idea of watching an Olympic event where everybody is, through whatever means, basically operating at their beyond their peak, to say like they're essentially cheating, I would find that incredible to watch. But in any percent speedrun, I don't care. Like, it's the exact opposite. I don't want to watch you take advantage of a glitch that completely changes the nature of the game. But if you want to take as many steroids as you possibly can and hit a baseball 700 yards, I'm all for it. That sounds incredible.
I want my guy on the mound with the needle still poking out of his ass.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see him
throw the
forgetting
ball
it.
123 miles an hour and just dare anybody to hit it, go for it. But if you're just going to skip to the end credits in a video game, you lost me.
We'll work on my metaphor as time goes on. This is the first draft.
I do think it was a very good metaphor in terms of, what is being done. And in terms of, the traditional Olympics and people playing or people participating in those events as they are intended is very much the kind of it matches up with the way you described the category of speedrunning is I want to get very good, and the other way is I want to bypass all the rules and be great. And weirdly enough, I think in sports they're still kind of operating within the rules as much as they're just like, I'm going to obey all the rules. I'm just going to deny the rules for being a person. I think like that's where the difference is. And watching
the
a
sake of-
non-person play sports sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's it. For the sake of my analogy, you actually need a category where we turn off gravity for this one guy for a while.
Yeah. We just get a modified howitzer to pitch. That sounds ideal. I'd watch that.
Call the boys. I've got an idea.
But I do follow some speedrunners. I follow the Games Done Quick channel on a few platforms, and they bring in a lot of speedrunners across the internet who are kind of like, they nestle into their own communities, but to kind of suggest that all speedrunners have something in common, I think is a bit ambitious. I think you'll find that like speedrunners of specific games build their communities and they're very closely knit, but speedrunners from one game to another, not so much. And I will say I definitely found new ways to enjoy some of the video games that I watch. Watching a speedrunner go through it, I definitely have a tendency to find those glitchless speedruns where it's them trying to match the developer's intent as they play through the game. But I think some of those have made for a much more interesting experience with the game for me than the original time I played through. You pointed out an element of the speedrun challenge that is the developers immediately recognizing the kind of value in the glitchless speed runs as we've described it, where they'll recognize right away that somebody might enjoy their game, replay it dozens of times and really master all of the elements of it to the point where they can complete it in a much shorter time than you might have originally expected. And they'll build rewards into the game immediately for that. And I think that's kind of maybe what led to the creation of speedruns and challenge runs, is creating this kind of positive feedback for creating an additional challenge for you. And I think without that kind of developer engagement on the same category, you might not see as many speedrunners or challenge runners today.
A point I wanted to raise, and it's because it's something we have discussed together before, so it might be an idea to just do it in a sort of public forum, is to what extent do we think that people of a certain generation and certain games being speedrun? So this is probably going to apply to all of us here. I don't know if it'll apply to everyone listening, because this is probably going to depend upon the gaming culture you grew up in. Nowadays, if you use Steam, if you use the Epic Game Store, if you use any of these, you probably get free games once in a while. If you're an Amazon Prime account, you get a free game once in a while. But a lot of us, when we grew up, we didn't tend to have that. So let's imagine myself, I'm pretty small kid, 8-9 years old. I've got my one video game console. And upon getting it, I've probably got one game. And let's imagine that game is Final Fantasy VII, because that's what it was.
Imagine.
It's not going to be hard. If you've got that one game and you know that you're going to be waiting 6 months until you get something new, at what point are you then almost pushed down this speed run, challenge run path? Because you can replay that game over and over, of course, and you could love the story. Like you can reread a book that you enjoy or rewatch a movie you enjoy. But games are unique in that regard, that you can play them in a different way every time. With a book, you can look for different themes, sure. With a movie, you can look more in the background, see what's going on with the cinematography and the mise en scène. But I think video games are uniquely lined up to let you experience it in the way that you want to. So you can create your own challenges, you can create your own approaches to a game. And I wonder to what extent, us owning one game or two games or three games led us naturally down the path of replaying, and then by extension, challenge runs, speed runs, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very big part of where challenge running and speed running comes from. Is first you have to enjoy the game. If you follow all of the advice that we've given, you'll get there. You'll make a great game, because we've given some very clear advice.
What was that advice again? If we can
just do it well. Make a good game.
Not making bad games.
Yeah.
Focus on the good things you do good. and
Yeah.
you'll do good.
Make more
And only
good
do
games
those.
back.
But if you really love the game and you're playing it over and over and over again, you'll kind of run out of different ways to experience it at some point. And that likely depends on the way the game is designed and the gameplay elements that are available to you. And that's where you start to see these kind of speedruns and challenge runs arise, is from people who are trying to find a way to get that first playthrough experience, the feelings that they had, that kind of new discovery. They're trying to recreate that enjoyment with a game they've already experienced, and it's tricky and it's maybe possible, but it's not going to be something that's very obvious. And I think challenge running gives you a way to continue enjoying that game. It might not be the first experience over again, but it's a way for you to continue with a game that you enjoyed and get more out of it than you would otherwise. And I think that's where, in the era that we grew up, having one game almost put you in that position where you either had to find new ways to enjoy it or you just gave up on the game and moved on.
And that's a really interesting idea, is the idea of searching for novelty in familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will know these games backwards and forwards. And it really reminds me actually specifically of something I kind of forgot, but I guess in a way it was almost my first introduction to a challenge run. And it was Final Fantasy VII. But I remember I was at a friend's house and my friend said, look, I can win a fight without attacking. And I was thinking, what the? Oh, he means he's going to cast magic, or he means he's going to throw items. No, he said, no magic, no items. I'm going to put the controller down and I'm going to win this fight anyway. And then I saw what he'd done. He had equipped the one character with the cover materia, which means they will try and take the damage for everyone when they're attacked. And he's paired this with that same character having the counterattack materia. So this character is getting hit with every enemy attack, no matter who it's aimed at. And at the same time, because he's taking damage, he's immediately responding with a counterattack. So it's all happening automatically. This one character is just demolishing the game. I hadn't even thought of pairing these materia as a kid together. And now I'm seeing this one friend of mine essentially reworking the game and seeing if he could win by doing nothing. And then when he started doing that and pairing Final Attack with the Phoenix Summon materia, you found that he had devised this way all on his own of almost the opposite of challenge running a game, of making a game almost impossible to lose. And that was his challenge, how to make this invulnerable party. And now I think about it, that's probably my first experience with a challenge run, was watching him do that.
I think you've kind of hit an element of challenge running and speed running that we might not have otherwise recognized, and that is developing what become optimal strategies. So when you create this additional challenge for yourself, or when you're trying to most efficiently navigate through a game, you'll figure out what we typically end up calling the meta, the most effective tactic. And outside of these challenge runs, that meta might be a little less obvious, but when you put that pressure, that goal of completing this challenge, like your friend saying, I'm going to build my team in a way where I don't even have to fight back. I just let the game play out and succeed. You kind of start to dig into the game mechanics and create the strategies yourself. And I definitely, I think that's one, I obviously don't have the same friends you do, so I don't know this person, but I think I ended up discovering that tactic as well when I realized that Vincent has a weapon that directly, or the damage is based on how many enemies he's killed.
Yeah.
And based on that end goal, knowing that I wanted to rack up as many kills in this character as possible, I came to the same conclusion of pairing cover and counterattack on Vincent so that he would get credit for all of those kills. And you'll find a lot of people who are playing the game outside of those challenge runs end up adopting the strategies of challenge runners because they're so effective.
I have never played without that materia combination since that day. It's interesting you say that it wasn't the same friend. Because Legion, turn on the fourth camera. They're here today. That idea then that you were just saying of then sort of more casual players then adopting those tactics, absolutely. And I find it really fascinating, the idea that the intrinsic logic of the game led to these materia combinations, leads to these ways of playing the game. And I love the idea that in that time, it's more difficult now by definition, was taking place in isolated communities, and someone in your town figured that out, someone in my town figured that out, someone in Legion's town figured that out. And it became global then, which I presume isn't so possible now, because as soon as someone finds a mega strat for a game, that goes online.
Well, the one thing that's common between all this and even the example I gave is the audience. There's usually an audience of why they're doing it, because it's a rare person who's just going to do it just for themselves. I mean, you say, I want to see if I can't beat this any faster, but a lot of times it's to, who's going to see it? How's anybody going to know, right? Unless it's recorded somewhere or somebody's watching or a witness to it, right? A lot of these speedruns, if you listen to the crowd, they get excited at certain parts. And it's kind of like, just as an example, like if you have like a player character who's sprinting, and the safe thing is just to hit the second or third ledge, right? But because they're spinning, if they're sprinting and they go to the very end of that ledge before they jump, they can maybe make the fourth step. And that's where the crowd goes, oh, and because it's a shared understanding of the risk reward. And that's what makes those speedruns kind of interesting, because it's not just the timer is the nemesis here. It's the little things in between that can make it interesting, that you kind of sit back and say, because we all know what is going to happen here. Because the most interesting games to do this with, I think, just my 2 cents, are the ones where there's less variables. So a game like Metroid, there's a game I've mentioned before to Banana, Pumpkin Jack. Pumpkin Jack is a great example. It's a kind of a modern game. Looks really great. It's very stylized. It's artistic. It's cartoony. It's this guy who's got a pumpkin head. Think of like, what is it? The Sleepy Hollow type theme.
Headless Horseman.
Yeah. But he's brought back by, I think, death or something. But people will speedrun that one because there are those lesser variables. It's the same game whether you're a brand new player or an experienced player. So you can go into it and potentially be able to do what that person does because the game doesn't change. I could speedrun Subnautica, but they're variables. So my experience as a novice Subnautica might be the best time that the most experienced person may not do, because the variables were just different enough that they couldn't replicate that issue. And that's kind of my point, is that it really just depends on the game sometimes. The game lends itself to certain speedrunning challenges, but that's just my take on it. But going on to challenges, which I know you know a little bit more about that, Com. You want to discuss challenge runs?
My knowledge of challenge running isn't by any means broad. It's very specific. It's mostly within the Soulsborne community. And I find it's very much to the point what you just said about games lacking variables. The joy, I think, of a challenge run within Soulsborne is the true lack of randomness outside of the bosses. Now, the bosses, I believe there is probably a way that you can manipulate them. In the end, they are programmed. In the end, they must be responding to your inputs. So you probably can control them in some way. I think there's a way to beat the blood-starved beast in Bloodborne, where you can move in a certain way that causes him not to do certain attacks. But outside of the bosses, the enemies are placed in the same place every time. They start, if they walk in a patrol path of 15 meters one direction and 15 meters back, they start on point X every single time. And they start walking. So if you arrive 33 seconds after warping in, and then the next time you arrive 33 seconds after warping in, the enemy is in the same position, walking in the same way, seeing the same stuff. So you do have that lack of randomness, which really lets you produce optimal strategies, which I imagine would be useful for speed running. Now, with challenge running, what you're really getting with Soulsborne games is the whole point of those games, from my perspective, and I think almost everyone's, is the challenge. It is this idea of the games that you used to play when we were small, where you go to an arcade and you had however many amounts of coins and you would try and beat this game before you ran out of coins, which is almost never the case. You almost never beat those because they were designed to be damn hard. Now, those games over time fell out of fashion, I'd imagine, with the advent of home consoles, because we didn't want to keep retrying after 3 lives, and the companies didn't have that incentive of, oh, more money? Great. No, their incentive was make a good game with a good narrative, so we'd buy the next one after we've already dropped the $60 on this one. So those games fall out of fashion. Games become a bit more hand-holdy, which I'm not criticizing. I think it's one of the most wonderful things is games becoming more and more accessible for people over time, because I think that contributes to people actually enjoying the hobby and in not just having that challenge aspect. Souls is a bit different. It deliberately is hard, and the reward is in following along through that journey. This boss who just spanked you, he's going to spank you again and again and again and again. But maybe after 15 tries, you're seeing the patterns. And after 25, you can reliably get him down to half health. And after 35, and so on and so forth. Now that is all well and good when you play it once, but the problem I have with Souls is, and this is my opinion on Souls, the equipment you carry doesn't matter. If you can beat that game with full plate armor, you can beat that game naked. Because you've understood that boss. You've understood how the game works. You've understood his patterns. If you wear full plate armor, he's still going to hit you like a big man. When, I was trying any other word, he's still going to hit you like a big man no matter what you're wearing. So if you're wearing nothing, if you're wearing everything, it doesn't make a huge difference. So when you know the boss, you know it. And this means that someone who's playing the game for the second time and wants a challenge has to artificially create challenge. And the way you'll often see that is people defining the methods they can use. So for example, I have to parry. I have to get those well-timed parry shots on every single boss if that boss permits me to have it. I'm going to fight this boss without rolling. That is a terribly hard thing to do. If you're a beginner, I'm going to fight without a shield for the first time. I'm going to use a weapon that I just find awkward. I can't get used to the timings of it. I'm only going to use light attacks. I'm only going to count my run if I don't get hit. I'm only going to count my run through the game if I don't get killed. And I think challenge running, particularly in Souls, it comes from this very foundational aspect of what those games are supposed to be. They're supposed to be hard, and you can only get that once. But the second time and the third time, you can make it hard.
At its core, where challenge running and speed running kind of comes from is you're giving yourself additional requirements to force yourself to be better at the game. And there's nothing beyond you that's requiring that of you. And I think it's very obvious in Souls games. You have people who are doing, the hitless run through every Souls games. It's just back to back. It's absurd. They're just showcasing like how well they understand the games and how much time they've put into learning patterns and recognizing them and responding appropriately, which there's some of the challenge right there is controlling yourself to make sure that you react correctly in those situations where you're given a tight window and you have to quickly process what you're seeing and what you need to do as a result. And it's maybe a little less obvious in other genres, things where you see the category of Super Mario games, the Kaizo, which I believe is Japanese for brutal. So you'll see a lot of these homebrew games made in the engine of Super Mario World or maybe Mario 3. And they are far, far beyond what the original Nintendo development team would have given you. It's absurd mechanics that require tremendous practice and absolute precision in a way that I've never had an interest in doing myself. But for somebody who loves those games, and I am somebody who loved the original Super Mario games, I get it. It's not for me, but I totally understand where you're coming from to say, I'm going to practice the mechanics of this game to the point where the original game, where all of these mechanics were first introduced, is no longer interesting to me. But this homebrewed version of that game that really pushes me to a level of excellence that I had to invest in order to reach. That interests me, and I totally get that, because I think at its core, that's what Dark Souls was trying to do, was to say, hey, remember when games forced you to be good at the game? And they built their entire series off of it. And then players of that series were like, let's take it a step further. And I think that's a really, really cool way for the player base to feel like they were involved in almost a development process.
Yeah. You can also, as just a secondary feature of related directly to Souls and specifically to Elden Ring, you can also look at the way that players will almost, and I don't like the idea behind this, but it's an interesting way that the community sort of grows. It's one of the things I like about games is when the community grows organically and you see these odd paths that it can take, because it's a society, and society is strange and weird and bizarre. You will see people almost saying that if you use help in the game, whether you summon a friend in as a co-op partner to take on a boss, or if you summon in one of the in-game ghostly apparitions to fight on your side, that's almost a second class of victory, that you didn't really beat the game. Like I say, for me, couldn't care less. It's in the game. Good for you. Good for you. And I love the idea that more people play these games. And if to get more people playing, we have to make the games more accessible and give these little extra helping hands, I'm all for it. But I love the way that at the same time, that little hierarchy almost emerges of people who beat the game without using the in-game help, of people who beat the game but didn't beat all the bosses, of people who beat the game but beat all of the main bosses, of people who beat the game but beat all of the main and the side bosses, and then the people who beat the game parrying everything. And I love that idea that pops up. As long as it remains inclusive and in a good spirit, I love that idea.
Yeah, I think that is part of the element of like the speedrun, challenge run community that represents the kind of negative aspect. And it's that idea of gatekeeping. Like, oh, if you play the game using, summoning a mimic, you didn't really beat the game. Yeah, you did. You absolutely did. So you didn't beat a challenge run of the game, but you beat the game. And that kind of condescending tone you'll get from challenge runners looking at people who didn't have thousands of hours to invest into developing the mechanical skill to master the game. That's the negative element of the speedrun and challenge run community. Is there's nothing wrong with being proud of this level of excellence that you've achieved in the game. There is something wrong with looking down on people who don't have the same priorities as you and didn't want to invest the time to reach that level of skill.
Just so when I played Elden Ring, it was on stream for the first time, and it was doing the All Remembrances run is what they call it. So it's not really a challenge run. It's just making sure you hit all of the main story bosses, because you only have to fight around 7 or 8. I think there's 15 or 16 total. So you do all of those. And I didn't encounter, and it was really heartwarming, a single person who was either overly impressed by it, who was like, hey, I'm glad to see you doing it properly. And I didn't find anyone who was saying like, oh, but you're not doing all bosses. I found it to be quite a well community in that regard. And at the same time, the few, and I admit it's a very thin amount, the small amount of viewing I've done for speedrunning, which is mostly watching sort of YouTube videos of the speedrun already done and then an explanation of what happened. The community there tended to be really supportive of the person doing the speedrun. And I thought there was a very nice warm element to the communities from what little experience I've had. Thankfully, didn't really experience much gatekeeping, which certainly exists.
Just to clarify, I want to point out that overwhelmingly my experience with these communities has been that they are very supportive.
Oh, hell yeah.
Speedrunning communities are very supportive of people who want to get into speedrunning. Challenge running communities are very supportive of people who want to get into challenge running. It's just those few outliers that have a tendency to ruin it for other people.
But it does make some players a bit hesitant to do certain things. And that part is what I don't like, because it's there, even if you're in a community that is very, that isn't very toxic. I mean, you can be in your own chat and be playing a game and say, would it be okay? Would you guys be okay if I summon a mimic here? Why are you asking chat? Play how you want to play. How about that? But no, that's my take, but that's always my take. I'm always going to side on the player side. How do you want to play it? If it's in game, it's as intended. And that's all I ever see. You want to play it your way for your own reason? Do it that way. Don't ask others for permission to play a certain style. But
can I go one further? Like, honestly, for me, if the game isn't multiplayer, I don't even care if you're hacking the game. I could not care less. If you're having fun, and if you can't beat Morgott in Elden Ring and you want to mod the game in a way that Morgott now can't move and can't attack, go for it.
Yeah.
It's no skin off my nose.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me in the slightest.
I completely agree with that. I think especially in games that are purely single player, play however the hell you want. Cheat as much as you want.
Get your brother
in games
to come and do it.
Yeah. In games that are co-op, as long as the people you're playing with are on board, the same things apply. But I think Legion kind of pointed out an element of gaming that's more recently become kind of an issue, and that is performing gameplay. So when you are streaming on Twitch, you're kind of balancing your experience with the marketability of what you're doing. If you're trying to grow your Twitch channel or something like that, then you have to think about what you're doing in terms of its appeal. And that's very different from playing a game on your own without an audience. And for that reason, I would say that, like, what you're saying, where you're asking, chat's permission almost, or trying to get their opinion, that's really up to you at that point to kind of say, well, since I'm playing this for chat, let's see what they want to see. But I think there are plenty of streamers who will say, this is how I want to play it. I'll advertise this as, this version of the run. And if you want to watch it, watch it. If you don't, there's plenty of other channels to find what you're looking for. And I think that's kind of like a separate topic outside of speedrunning and challenge running. But it is something that you'll have viewers who show up expecting you to be one of the many challenge runners for a Souls game. And if you're just doing a straight playthrough of, I'm just going to figure it out on my own, there will be people who show up and just say, oh, do this, or backseat a little bit, or did you know you could do this? And it's just like, you need to know what you're getting into. And if you're joining those streams and ruining the experience for somebody, you might end up ruining a great game for someone. And that's really devastating, to kind of take that experience away from somebody and ruin what could have been a great game.
I'm not going to name the game, but there is one game that I played where it was the community that made it insufferable. The game, I was really having a great time, but the amount of unwanted advice, unwanted indicators what I should be doing next that I was playing incorrectly, turned me off.
Yeah,
and I have no desire to play that game anymore.
Right, and that's why I prefaced a lot of that, is because you almost don't have challenge runners. I mean, you could, right? You could be the personality that's what you do, but the community, I mean, the large majority of speedrunners, challenge runners, do it for an audience. And I don't mean just Twitch. I mean, I did that when I was young, so I wouldn't have done it just for me. I already knew Samus was a female, right? But I had like friends I wanted to see, and I was like, okay, I'll show you, because they didn't believe me. It's not like you could take a screenshot,
Right.
So you had to show them, right?
I nearly said, get your phone out.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it wouldn't work either.
Right. So you got an hour of your time, I'll show it to you. So
Just
that's
pull out your flip phone.
Hey.
Yeah.
That's part of channel law now.
Yeah.
That's channel law.
Well, back in that time, we didn't even have flip phones. So. Yeah.
Back in the early 14th century? What?
Yeah. Back in my day.
I feel like there's going to be quite a bit of that on this channel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the youngest of us, we are not young.
Yeah. So
a lot of that, when I was your age, Pluto was a planet nonsense.
Oh, no, we're not getting into that now. That's another episode.
And it's still not a
Gamers
planet.
Advocate Podcast, episode 14. Pluto.
Yeah.
Back in my day, we didn't even know what Pluto was.
What do you mean more than one planet?
Yeah. You know, the challenge modes come in all different flavors too, outside of, you know, Souls. One thing, and I didn't think about this originally, I play Skyrim like most people with mods, but all my mods are more quality of life, like graphical upgrades and things like that.
And trees.
Oh, I love trees. Yeah, yeah. I don't have a ton of mods. I may right now have about 6-7 mods on, but they make the game look beautiful. But the one mod I always put on, it's a very small mod. It's called Simply Bigger Trees. And all the trees are 50 to 100% bigger. And it actually looks native. Like that's how it should have looked in the game. But one thing I do in that game, and it's in the game now, it's, what is it called? Like hardcore? I forget what it's called.
There is a hardcore mode in Skyrim.
Right. But you have to eat. You have to stay warm. So in a normal playthrough, I would probably try to get the best type of armor I could get. I only wear fur. I only wear fur armor in that playstyle. And it's because it's just the best thing to wear, because you'll get cold really fast just in the environment, because it's always cold in Skyrim.
Well, this goes back to the earliest days of the modding community for Skyrim. I believe that wasn't in the game initially.
Right, it wasn't.
It's a mix of the mod's realistic needs and diseases, and I was going to say Frostpunk. That's the game, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a mod called Frostfall or something like that.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they've combined those together to make this native version within the game now.
And unfortunately, the game didn't come with like a ability to, you know, make your own campsite. So I had to get a mod for that, because if I'm going to be out in the world, because you can't fast travel in that mode. You have to go from one point to another, either on a horse or one of those horse and buggy things, but it takes real time to do it. Or no, it can do fast travel in that mode. But I actually have a mod that actually takes you second by second to the other town on those things. So I have no fast travel in those things at all. So I've got used to doing that, and to me, I can't do it any other way now, because it just seems the right way to play. And that's not a challenge at all. It was just something I kind of discovered, because I'm like, okay, I'll give that a shot.
That's almost an immersion run rather than a challenge run.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that you reminded me actually of going back when Grand Theft Auto 4 came out. I remember when I first read that taxi rides could be skippable or not skipped. You could decide. And sometimes it was great fun, just sitting in the back and looking at the city go by, watching all the weird, janky driving physics as cars smashed into each other for seemingly no reason. You know, there was a lot of fun to be had in that. And it was just another way of playing a game where you didn't introduce a challenge in the sense of difficulty, but you almost challenged yourself to be immersed within that world and to play by the rules of the world, and not by the rules of someone sitting outside of that world with a game controller in their hand. You're almost putting yourself in there and suffering by the rules that those people have to suffer by. In the Skyrim's case, cold, food, disease.
Yeah. And a game both me and you played for immersion was Cyberpunk. And I completely committed to the immersion. In fact, it gets so easy, even on the new version of Cyberpunk, which is harder. To me, I found pretty easy. So I would stealth everything. Everything I did was through stealth. So I would, if I got caught, I got caught. It's just what it was. But I almost tried to stealth everything in the game, and that made the game significantly longer, but a lot more risk reward, feeling for you. And it always kind of kept that feeling of excitement while you're just, because you could just go in there guns blazing and just destroy everything you're trying to do within seconds. But I always tried to stealth it.
I think that's something that it's a way I like to play as well. Is, again, it's not a challenge run per se, but it is formation of a challenge in and of itself. It's what I used to call informally like the consequence runs. And it was, if I'm playing, Deus Ex was a big one that I would do this with. So when I'm playing Deus Ex, I'm not generally quick saving before breaking my way out of a vent into a big room. If I break out into that room and all of a sudden there's guards there and I was sneaking and those guards catch me, tough. That's my fault. I should have gone in a different way. I should have tried to scope out that room beforehand. And I found a lot of the more interesting organic interactions you could have with the game came when you did that, when you let those consequences play out, rather than just saying to yourself, quick load, I'll check what's behind that door. Quick load, I'll check what's over there. Quick load. And then you see that, and the main memory I have of this is in strategy games, and the two I can think of is Crusader Kings and XCOM Reboot is the Iron Man mode, where anything that you do is now permanent. You have one autosave file. As a rule, it's a bit sketchy because you don't know what can happen to that file, corruptions and so forth. But if you're willing to go in and take that risk, then when you move your one soldier and accidentally activate that pod of aliens, you're going to have to deal with that now. There's no more playing optimally. There's playing in the most reactive way that you possibly can to this new challenge that you created by using the inability to quick load and quick save.
Bananas heard me talk about, save scumming. I don't care. Save scum all you want. That's why that save button exists. But if you don't want to, that's fine. But I just like the whole challenge run where you can't bring in a mimic or something. I've seen so many, you're save scumming before them. Let them play the game how they want to play the game. My goodness. If they want to save before they roll dice in Baldur's Gate 3 and they don't get the optimal outcome, let them play the game.
Yeah. Well, there's the reason that I'm probably not going to replay this game again. So if I want to see the other consequence, I don't want to put in another 50 hours to get to this cutscene. I just want to play it and see it twice. But
That's
there's also
exactly
the thing that
what I was going to say.
Oh, yeah. The only other thing I was going to add was it comes back to what we said earlier. If you're playing a single player game the way that you want to, I do not care. In fact, I'm happy for you. And it's almost just two different kinds of gaming. And sometimes when I play Deus Ex, I'm in power fantasy mode. And I will be quick saving. And I will be quick loading. But sometimes I'm in consequence mode. And in that situation, no quick saving, quick loading. It's just different ways to play. Which is ultimately what challenge runs are, right? I'd imagine if we think back to challenge and speed runs, when someone is a speedrunner, they probably speedrun because they love that game. I would imagine most people speedrunning Final Fantasy VII are fans. People speedrunning Resident Evil 3 are fans. They probably play it sometimes normally as well. Maybe not so much. I think some of the passion must go out when you look at a game in that perspective. But I would wager sometimes they just turn on the game and they think, I'm going to do this Mako reactor bombing mission the way I used to. I'm just going to take my time, enjoy the story, enjoy the music, because how couldn't you? And it's just another way of playing.
Yeah, me and Banana are on the same page as far as Mass Effect on Insanity is probably the only way I can play. I mean, because I just know the game so well. But Mass Effect 2 does not scale well at the beginning of it until the first end of the first act. I don't know, first half acts, I guess, the act 1 and 2. Because the weapons you find and the health that you acquire is not proportional to the amount of enemies and the health that they throw at you. And so I wouldn't say, it's a matter of get good. It is almost nigh impossible because there's so much coming at you that you can't even your squad mates are going to be dead. It's just you running around, picking up the pieces.
From cover to cover, just desperately holding on.
Yeah, it's not really, but that's why I said it's not scaled at all. And that's me knowing the game really well. I'm very confident I could play that game, almost half blindfolded. But Banana has the same experience, so at least there's some, I have some backup on that. But yeah, that is a challenge run in a way because it's insanity. But when the games don't scale well either, it's like, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of, and if you play through a challenge run and it comes down to whether or not everything just fell into place, it's not really a challenge run. It's just kind of like a, how many times did it take you to reset run? That's
the only thing being challenged is your patience.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where certain elements of challenge running or speed running fall apart, where it's if the challenge is in me controlling my emotions at a game that's just constantly not working out in my favor, it's not a challenge run. It's anger management. I don't play video games for that.
Yeah, because in Mass Effect 3, I have the badges. Well, it's a long story. I don't have them anymore. But I have the platinum badges for the multiplayer of when I would play, on platinum. But that's with the character that's at full level and, has all their powers and the weapons I want to do. Mass Effect 2, you have half that, really. And it's the same level type enemies that you're facing. And like I said, it doesn't scale well. So again, you would swear I hate Mass Effect based on how I always trash it. But Anything else to add for some closing thoughts, or you gonna be doing any challenge runs soon?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is if you could see yourself doing a challenge and or speed run outside of just cranking up the difficulty, but really trying to do something different, whether it be banning yourself from certain weapons, whether it be doing the game in a certain time, whether you're trying to break the game's code to play the game in a certain way, what game would you do? What's the first one that you would probably do? Bearing in mind, you're probably going to hate the game by the time you're done.
I'd say the most appealing kind of challenge run to me has been the Nuzlocke run in Pokemon games. The idea that when you enter a new area, you get one chance to catch a new Pokemon, and it's whatever you encounter first. If you catch that Pokemon, you add it to your team. If you don't, you can't catch another Pokemon until you move to the next area. If a Pokemon on your team dies, it's gone forever. I feel like there are variations on the Nuzlocke run, but it's very much like a complete challenge run where it completely overhauls the way you play the game. And it has a lot of appeal to me in that it's a game that I've played dozens of times. And it genuinely presents a challenge. I think there's an element of it where like you can't kind of grind indefinitely to protect, Pokemon you want to keep around. But it does kind of force you to really strategize and build your team as best as you can, knowing that it's probably going to be a terrible team. And I think there's an element of that I think, particularly with the older Pokemon games, the ones I know very well, and are relatively simple, I think that challenge run appeals to me. That being said, I haven't done it. I probably won't. But if I were going to do one, I think that's probably the one I would do.
I've been playing Nier Automata a lot recently, and for context, I don't want to give any game spoilers away or anything like that, but the mechanics of it, the game becomes fairly easy to play fairly early on. But the very beginning of it, obviously, if you don't know how to play it, it's difficult anyway, but the very beginning of it is pretty punishing, and for no reason. I mean, because when you die in that one, you literally start at the very, very beginning, doing all the little tactics over and over again. It's like the tutorial, and it lasts for 20, 25 minutes. So if you die anywhere in that, you got to go back, do it again. So I think doing it on like the hardest difficulty would be something I'd like to try, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
That game is an
That's gonna be
interesting one as well. Because my first playthrough, I did 100% unlocked all the endings, and then tried to do a second playthrough, and I was like, I hate this. I don't enjoy this game anymore. And I think it's because after that first playthrough, there wasn't really anything more for me. I had experienced it all.
But what, to give a little bit more context to what Banana's saying, the game is intended to be played over and over because of
I know
the storylines. Yeah. So anybody who's thinking of like playing is like, oh, I don't want to play it if I'm going to get bored. Play it, and you'll see.
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
I wholly endorse one complete playthrough of that game. It's coming back because, like you said, the game kind of loops over itself, and you'll experience the story from multiple perspectives. Trying to do that full experience more than once, you'll start to notice the pacing issues on a second playthrough, and that's where I fell away from it. But a completionist run, which is kind of its own challenge run category, I love those. I love the idea of experiencing everything a game has to offer. And if you can condense that into a single playthrough, which for some games that's not an option, but if you can manage that in a single playthrough, I think that's the way to watch a game. If you're not going to get to experience it yourself, find a completionist who's going to do a 100% run and watch them.
Yeah. I started doing that with I did do that on Hellblade, the second one. because I had gotten so used to being able to play the Hellblade 1, I kind of knew what to look for and how to do stuff. And yeah, I did the first playthrough, Hellblade 2, 100%, no problem.
Yeah, I've done the 100% playthroughs of the Final Fantasy games I've played on stream. And I mean, I've had to do some stuff off stream to, grind out the tedious elements that I don't want to force people to just sit and watch. They watch me fight this same enemy 400 times. Nobody needs to see that, but I have tried to highlight all of the unique experiences that you can get from a game in a single playthrough. And I think that's the challenge run that appeals to me, is experiencing everything.
What game was that?
That was me playing Final Fantasy VII. That was the big one.
All right.
I think for myself, just very quickly, I think there'd probably be two. One of them is a bit frivolous, but honestly, I think it would be hard. You might have to cue in the music around now, but I would love to do a Persona 5, like, try not to boogie challenge. Because if I'm listening to that music for 70, 80, 90 hours, there's no way these shoulders ain't popping.
And that's the exact opposite of an appealing challenge run to me, because you're taking the joy away from the game.
That's what a challenge run is.
Yeah.
The true, I don't know if this is a challenge, but it's more of just
challenge run. Don't enjoy yourself.
No problem. Put me on Twitch playing Monster Hunter. That tickled me. The genuine one, I don't think it's a real challenge, but it's something I would be interested in trying, is I would love to fly around the world in real time on Flight Simulator. So pick one airport, I pick Charles de Gaulle, and fly west from Charles de Gaulle and land coming in from the eastern Charles de Gaulle in real time. I would love to try that. I'm not going to. I don't want to. But I kind of would love to.
That's a very interesting one.
Very boring one.
Yeah, Com is a immersion specialist, so
He's an idiot.
I feel like that's one that I would enjoy for myself. But if you were like, I'm going to stream this, and I'll be like, neat, I won't be there.
I won't be there. I've got so many appointments that day.
Yeah. So much not watching that to do.
It's a 24-hour stream. Buckle in. Well, okay.
That's 24 hours where you and I will be out of contact for some reason.
Yeah, the real tragic part, right? 24-hour stream. It's going to be take off, autopilot on, wait.
Okay. Yeah.
Just Cobb making occasional announcements like, "Oh, looks like we have turbulence ahead. Most of you won't even notice."
Yeah, but I'll do like, I'll shake the desk when it goes.
Hilarious. All right. Well, I guess we'll close on that. But if you guys have any comments or suggestions, put it in the comments, and maybe there's a challenge run that maybe we have done that we don't know about, or maybe you're one that you're wanting to do. Well, like the video, go ahead and give it a like and sub to the channel, which are 100% free on YouTube. And we'll see you guys later. Take care.